When you think about a spinal cord injury, the first thing that probably comes to mind is mobility, right? The visible challenges. But for so many people, there's this other battle going on, one that's just as tough, but totally invisible. We're talking about chronic pain. So, how do we even start to understand, let alone treat, this invisible injury? Let's get into it.
Wow. I mean, that's a really intense description, isn't it? It comes directly from the source material, and it makes it so clear we're not just talking about an ache. This is something else entirely, what's known as neuropathic pain. It's severe, it's complex, and it completely changes lives. So how on earth did researchers begin to tackle something like this? So here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at just how big this problem really is. Then, we'll get into how experts even start to map out the different kinds of pain. From there, we'll zoom in on the search for treatments that actually work, check out what the evidence says, and finally, talk about what it all means for patients.
All right, first things first, let's try to put a number on this. It's one thing to talk about pain in the abstract, but just how many people are we really talking about here?
So a huge systematic review, basically a study of studies, found that a whopping 68% of people with a spinal cord injury, or SCI, live with some kind of chronic pain. Just let that sink in. That's more than 2 out of every 3 people. So yeah, this isn't some side note. It's a central, daily reality for the vast majority of the SCI community. Okay, so we've got this huge number, 68%. But you've got to wonder, right? Is all that pain the same? And the answer is not even close. To have any hope of treating it, doctors and researchers first needed a common language, a way to classify exactly what patients are feeling.
And that's where this comes in, the International Spinal Cord Injury Pain Classification System, or ICEP. You can think of it as the Rosetta Stone for pain research. It gives everyone, researchers, doctors, you name it, a common framework so that when they talk about pain, they're all talking about the same thing. Absolutely crucial.
So, with this system in hand, researchers could really start to dissect that 68% number. Now, if you're looking at this and thinking, hey, wait a minute, those numbers add up to way more than 100, you're absolutely right. And that's because one person can have more than one type of pain at the same time. You can see neuropathic pain is the most common at 58%, with musculoskeletal pain right behind it.
But look, anyone can throw a percentage up on a screen. The real question is, how do we know we can trust these numbers? Well, the answer is in the process. And trust me, the way they got to these numbers was incredibly thorough.
Just take a look at this. This chart basically shows you the whole journey. They started with, get this, over 1,300 studies. And from there, they just whittled it down and down and down, getting rid of duplicates, studies that weren't relevant, ones that just weren't designed well, until they were left with only the 37 absolute best, most solid studies. That's why we can be so confident in these findings. It's that level of rigor.
Okay, so we've got a map of the problem. Now, let's zoom in on the biggest, and honestly, one of the trickiest parts of that map, neuropathic pain.
And that brings us to the million-dollar question, right? For doctors, for patients, for everyone. With all the different medications out there, which ones actually, work?
To figure that out, researchers use this really cool statistical tool called a network meta-analysis. And honestly, it's a total game changer. What it lets them do is take all the data from a bunch of different clinical trials and compare a whole smorgasbord of treatments all at once, even if those treatments were never directly compared in a head-to-head trial.
And this diagram here kind of gives you a picture of what that looks like. I know, it's a bit complex, but stick with me. Each one of those dots is a different drug, or a placebo, and every line connecting them, that represents at least one study that compared the two. By linking all this evidence from 20 separate trials, they could finally see how all 11 drugs stack up against each other.
All right, this is what it's all been leading up to, the results. After all that analysis, all that work, what did they actually find out about these drugs?
It's the big question, right? With 11 different drugs in the race, which ones came out on top? Let's see.
And boom, here it is, all the results packed into this one image. This is what's called a heat map, and it ranks all 11 drugs on 5 different measures. The key is super simple. Green is good, red is not so good. And you can see right away, can't you? Some drugs, like the cannabinoids way over on the left, have a lot of red, and others, well, they're looking a lot greener.
So, the analysis really did show a clear group of winners. 7 drugs proved to be effective. You probably recognize some of these names like gabapentin or amitriptyline. But here's the surprise. The one that came out on top for pure pain relief was actually BTXA. You might know it better as botulinum toxin A. So what this study really did was create a brand new evidence-based ranking system, a hierarchy, if you will. You've got your first-line choices, the heavy hitters like gabapentin, amitriptyline, and BTXA. Then you've got your solid second-line options. And then there's the stuff that just didn't make the cut.
Yeah, based on this huge analysis, these 4 drugs are just not recommended for this kind of pain. And what's really interesting here is that this list includes things like cannabinoids, which you hear talked about a lot for pain. But when you look at the hard data for this specific type of pain, they actually ranked dead last on effectiveness. And something like tramadol was linked to more serious side effects. The evidence just isn't there.
Okay, so we've gone through a ton of data. What's the bottom line? What does all of this actually mean for doctors and, most importantly, for the patients themselves? This right here, this comparison really gets to the core of it. There's no single best drug for everyone. Let's just take these two for example, lamotrigine and gabapentin. The data says lamotrigine has the best safety profile, fewer side effects. Great. But gabapentin is better if you're also dealing with things like depression or sleep issues that often go along with chronic pain. So which one is best? Well, it completely depends on you.
And that, right there, is the most important takeaway from all of this. This research isn't some strict rulebook. It's a roadmap. It's a powerful tool that lets doctors and patients sit down together and have a real, informed conversation to figure out the best path forward based on the best evidence we have today.
All right, let's wrap this up with a quick summary. First, the problem is huge. We're talking 68% of people with an SCI dealing with chronic pain. That's massive. Second, for neuropathic pain, we now have a clear, evidence-backed ranking of what works, and we know the top performers. But, and this is the big one, it's all about the nuance. Treatment has to be personalized. One size does not fit all. Look, this research is a massive step forward for treating pain with medication. But it also kind of makes you think about what's next, right? As our understanding of pain gets more and more sophisticated, how do we move beyond just pills? How do we build a truly holistic approach that treats the whole person, not just the symptom? That's the real path forward.